All right, we are in meeting mode, which means you are all in control of your own audio and your own video. We are recording this session and we are going to have basically a presentation at the beginning and then lots of time, like half an hour for Q&A. We're not recording the Q&A. So if you have a question you want to ask at the end and you don't have to worry about it being immemorialized and people being able to hear your question in 6 or 8 months on an anonymous recording on E4All. So I am going to share my screen and bring up just a simple PowerPoint to get us all set up. All righty. Here we go. Opening bookends. View presents. You are here with us on what we call an E4All deep dive. We do these every month and we try to find a topic that we know our small business entrepreneur community across the whole E4All network needs to know beyond just the basics of getting a business started. They're not things that you necessarily think about every day, but when you need to know them, you need to know. And this is one that I have felt for a while was overdue, especially here we are recording this in April 2021. So we've all been stuck at home working for 13 months. And I bet very few of us have stopped to wonder how safe is it working over our computers. So that's what we're going to spend some time talking about today. I'm Deborah Gallant. I am the executive director of E4All in Berkshire County, Massachusetts. We have 10 locations altogether. E4All stands for Entrepreneurship for All, and I'm going to let our speaker, Gene Berkowitz, introduce himself in just a moment. If anyone doesn't know what E4All is, just updating you, E4All is Entrepreneurship for All. We run pitch contests and business accelerators to help people get their businesses started. We've been around since 2013 here in Berkshire County since 2019, and you can find out all about us at e4all.org. We wouldn't be here presenting this free program for you without the generosity of these sponsors here in our Berkshire County region. So thank you very much to all of you. We offer these deep dives every month. I try to do them on a Monday afternoon, either the 2nd or the 3rd. And for those of us in Massachusetts, we have next Monday off. It's Patriots Day, which is why you're getting us on the 2nd Monday. Patriots Day, I live in New York. They're going to give me the day off. I'm taking it. So we're here on April 12th. Next month, we're going to have Raymond Lanza-Weil from Common Capital talking about funding options for small business. In June, we're having one about corporate entities, B Corps, S Corps, LLCs, DBAs, profit, not-for-profit, what makes sense, with a fantastic guest presenter. And then we're going to do one on equity issues in your small business in July. The idea of these deep dives is they might be great for you right now if you're here with us live, and many of you are, but for a lot of folks, what it is they like to come back and watch this when it makes sense. So we have a terrific archive on our E4All website, including past ones on getting certified as a minority or woman-owned business, e-commerce. One of the best ones we've done is hiring your first employee, which if you've never done that, can be really daunting. So this one will be archived along with the rest of them. This topic is one that actually, Gene, I think you and your wife, Karen Pelto, who's one of our fantastic mentors, said, oh, we have this expertise. Gene knows this. You should bring him in and do this. And it's like, I did not need convincing, because I think these issues about the security of our home networks and the work that we're doing is something that we all just sort of, I don't want to think about it. Let's just assume it's all okay. And it's not, or it might not be. And I know it was 60 Minutes, was it called Solar Winds? Hacked like, I don't know, half of the businesses in this country. And maybe you think, oh, I'm so small, it doesn't matter. Well, it matters. So without further ado, Gene Berkowitz is going to talk to us a little bit, as much as you can, about cybersecurity. And again, he's going to go for an hour, more or less. Then we're going to stop the recording, and there's going to be lots of room for questions. And we also have a few polls as we go. So stay tuned and hopefully answer the polls that will help inform us. So without further ado, Gene, you're up.
Thank you, Deborah, and thanks to E4All, and thank you all for joining us today. Just very quickly, I've been working with computers since I was a kid, starting in the 1970s. I've been working as a software developer and engineer for my entire career. In about the last 5 years, I have a role as a product security leader for my employer, where I'm responsible for helping developers make sure that our products are secure and not subject to cyber attack or malware or anything else that can go wrong. So I do have a lot of personal experience and just a lot of history working with computers and the sort of things that can happen, and especially working from home. So I'm going to bring up a little presentation. I'll try not, I don't think I can talk for an hour. We'll see.
I bet you can. So I'm actually gonna run the first poll while he's bringing up his presentation. Oh, Casey, I can't do it, so I think you're gonna have to. For some reason, it says I'm not allowed. And Jean, you can start sharing your screen. And Casey, if you get the poll working, great. If not, we're gonna keep going anyway.
So
should be launched.
Can you see the screen, the slide?
I can. Are folks seeing the poll? By the way, you can type in the chat as we go if you have something we want to ask, or use the raise your hand function. I'm not seeing the poll, but that might be because I'm one of the presenters. You guys are seeing it? Good. Casey, you're going to have to share the results since I'm not seeing it at all.
Will do. You let me know when you want to close it.
So
all right, Jean, you're up.
Okay,
sorry.
Thank you. So to start, I'm going to talk about basically two things, which is protecting yourself and then protecting your small business. Some of this, some of you may be very familiar with this, in which case, just hang on. I'll try not to get too jargonish or into too much detail. But these are just a few things that everyone who's working from home, especially if you're running your business from your home, you should be aware of. The first thing I would suggest to all of you is, as much as possible, keep your work, your small business, and your home separate. If you have guests or family members, try not to give them access to the personal computer you use for your small business. It's simply too easy for someone else to visit a website, download an application, open the wrong email, and put your business in jeopardy. So if it's possible for you, I would always recommend that if you get a second computer, if possible, either for your family or for your business. And most of the major computer makers sell refurbished computers, and these are very reliable and they're exceptionally good deals most of the time. And so there's some links here, and I assume that since this presentation will be archived, and maybe we can even send out the PowerPoint if necessary. But for some very short money, you can arrange to have another computer for your kids to work on, or just to or for your cat to stay warm on, if that's the case. But the idea is your business and should, as much as possible, should be exclusive to one computer that's dedicated.
Jean, can you tell me why it's dangerous to have my kid use my computer for homework?
It's not necessarily dangerous for homework, but depending on the software being used by, say, a school system or even a university, a lot of those programs give extensive access to your computer, to the camera, to the audio, and to the data stored on it. And what that means is your security is now only as good as that system's security. as good as that school system security or as good as your university security. The other problem is doing your homework is not the only thing kids do on computers. They're going to be talking with their friends. They're going to be playing games. They're going to be visiting websites, and generally the risk is low. But but you want to absolutely, as much as possible, minimize the risk from potential problems. You hear about things like ransomware, which is you open the wrong email, and then a few minutes later, your computer, all the data on your computer is encrypted, and you can't use it anymore without paying a ransom. Now you could possibly make this mistake yourself, but obviously to minimize the risk, you want to minimize who else is using the computer. So it's just if it is possible.
All right, so let me throw another scenario at you. Let's say that Cheryl will answer the questions. Absolutely. Let's say I'm a small business owner and I hire a part-time employee, and you're saying I should supply that employee with a computer and tell them to only use it for my business rather than they're using their own computer, because once they're on with my work and my network, that my whole organization is endangered from that access.
It sort of depends on the nature of the business, but yes, I agree. If you have somebody who's doing computer work for you, you would expect that they're doing that on a computer that's limited to business purposes. Like now, you might hire someone like a web designer, in which case they might have multiple clients work in progress on their computer, and that's certainly acceptable. But it wouldn't give me great confidence if they were also letting their children or their friends come over and use that computer for other purposes.
Okay. Casey, do you want to give the results of the poll since I can't do that?
Sure thing. So for the do you run your business from your home computer, we have 100% yes. 6 people answered yes on that one. Is the computer used for work? Only used by me for work was 33%. That's 2 people. Only used by me, but also do things other than work on it. That's 60% of everyone. And used by other members of the family for who knows what, it's 0% of everyone.
Oh, so at least they're that, but they are using it themselves for other things as well.
Right. Does your business offer Wi-Fi to clients and customers? 0% said yes, 83% no, and possibly in the future was 17%. And does your business accept credit cards for payment? Yes, only online. They enter their CC info. That's 0%. Yes, online. Also other ways like phone and Square. That's 50% of people. No, 0%. And not yet, but I plan to is another 15%.
All right. That answered a lot of questions. Thank you for that, Casey.
No, that's good. I mean, if it is your own computer, yes, you can do it for other things, but you just need to be aware that the activities you do on that computer could potentially put your business at risk. So just by the other things that you do, nobody intends to have bad things happen to their computer or their data, but there's always the possibility. This is another aspect, which is when you're working from home, we all have, almost everybody should have some sort of internet router that's either something you got from your cable company or that's the most typical. You might have your own router. You might have something like a cable modem and then a router, but many people use the equipment all the equipment that's supplied by their cable or internet provider. There's a couple of things, which is the SSID, and that's how you advertise your Wi-Fi network so you can find it. And for a lot of times, if you're not, unless you do something specific, it will come up with a default which is chosen for you by the cable company. And so you might recognize something like this, where it says My Spectrum Wi-Fi, and you know that's yours, and that's the one you log into. Then after the ID, excuse me, after the ID, then there's a password that's used. And that password, sometimes it's also referred to as a pre-shared key, is also something that's provided by your cable company. And oftentimes you'll find on the router or the cable modem, this is all this information's on a sticker on the bottom of your router. And you just know, okay, this is how I log in, and this is the one I want to connect to. The only problem is that this gives off an enormous amount of information to bad actors, because basically they can look at an SSID and know who your cable company is. That means that they have a very good idea about the kind of equipment that you're using. And a lot of times they can determine the formula that's used to pick these random passwords. And because they know that, for example, that the cable company tends to pick things like 2 5-letter words.
All right, so Gene, I have, looking here on my phone, I'm connected to My Spectrum Wi-Fi 64-2G. You're telling me I should rename that?
Yes, you should. And simply because this is being broadcast. So anyone who's capable of picking up your Wi-Fi, and you may notice, depending on where you live, if your computer or your phone may be showing you 5, 10, or 20.
Right, as people drive by your house, they can see it, right? I've seen that happen on my phone. Like, do you want to connect to Ann's network or whatever it is?
Right. And so a recommendation is simply that you change this. Now, it's not terribly difficult to do. But it's not something that is that you're normally suggested to do.
All right, so help me out here. How do I do it? I mean, I don't even know where to go.
Okay, let's look at the next slide. All routers let you do this. I'll get to the detail in just a minute. When you change, if and when you get around to changing this, don't make the mistake of putting even more personal identifying information up as your SSID, like your address, because that now gives somebody 2 pieces of information, not only the network, but where it is, who it is. So you'll typically just want to pick something that's memorable for you, but has no meaning to anyone else. I will put just a little tip. Oftentimes now the cable saw equipment tends to do this automatically, but if you do pick a name, you get to name the what they call 2.4G and the 5G networks can have separate names. And it's a good idea. And usually you'll see something as like My Wi-Fi and My Wi-Fi 5G. And it's important that you do use separate names, because a lot of, especially older equipment, but even modern equipment, if it sees the same name, it can sometimes jump back and forth between the 2 networks. And that can sometimes explain why you have connection problems. So here's how you do it.
You got to go back because the password was part of there and we didn't get to that, right? So.
Oh, okay. Well,
back one more.
It's actually here.
Okay.
It's all done at the same time. So the interesting thing is that your router, your Wi-Fi router can be accessed with your web browser, and the instructions for doing this are, you can often find them on your cable company's website. The other way you can do it is you simply Google the model number of your router. You turn it over, it'll say what the model is. If you Google that, you will find the instructions on how to do this. And this is also why it's important to do this, because anyone can find the instructions on how to do this. When you do that, you need to know the, sometimes it's a name, but usually it's an IP address, one of those number network addresses. And when you open that in your browser, it will take you to a screen where your router will ask you to log in. And the login for your router is also something that's very commonly known. They're almost always set to a default. Sometimes it's printed up, it's maybe also on a label that's on the bottom of the router. But many times it's as simple as admin or password. And it's so that the first time you use it, you don't have to, you can, it's just the default. The problem is I can't give you specifics because every router does it slightly differently. But there are usually good step-by-step instructions that you can find. And we can figure out how to, get you some assistance if you want. When you do that, it's up to you to pick a password. And this password isn't your Wi-Fi password. This is the password that unlocks your router, so that you can change. I think
you need to explain to me why having a secure router is important, because I'm not sure I understand that. I understand having my secure Wi-Fi. What is having an insecure router open me up to?
Lots and lots of terrible things. If someone can get access to your router, they can redirect traffic. So that it doesn't necessarily, so that rather than it going to that any browsing or work you do doesn't necessarily go directly to the website you specify, it goes via that they choose. It also means once they've accessed the router, they can create access for themselves. So, and they can potentially monitor what's going on. They can see all the other computers connected to your home network or your phones. And they can, virtually everybody does lock down their router. Like when you'll notice on your phone, when you see your Wi-Fi, there's a little padlock next to it. So that means, yeah, you have to know the password to connect. We do that so that other people are not using our Wi-Fi network and consuming our bandwidth. So if you haven't properly secured this stuff, someone else can be on your network and doing basically whatever they like. They can also be performing illegal activities using your IP address. Should law enforcement get involved, the first thing that they have is the IP address from which something originated. And so then the burden of proof is on you to prove that, oh, it wasn't you doing it, it must have been someone who was on your network. The easiest way to not have to worry about that is to take these very straightforward precautions and use good, strong passwords and make sure that each of these components is secured.
All right, we have a lot of questions popping up, but I think I'm going to stick to the format of having Gene go through the whole thing, and then we'll open up to questions. And if he finishes sooner, we'll go right to the questions. I have a question about firewalls, but I'm going to save that till later too. So keep on rolling.
All right. So you're going to want to pick a good password. We can have a quick discussion later about what is a good password. Many routers often have a feature called remote management. And this is a terrible, terrible thing. This actually lets someone on the internet log into your router. Why this is still, it's mostly provided so that if you have remote technical support or whatever, they can operate the router and fix problems. But for most home users, this should never, ever be active. By default, it is not. But you just want to make sure that because the terminology can be confusing and it's not always clear, you just want to make sure that this is something that you don't activate. Once a router has remote administration access, it can be located by other people on the internet, and eventually it will be attacked. One last thing, and this is extra geeky. Most routers support a feature called universal plug and play. And this is a convenience feature. Now, I don't know how many of you have smart devices in your home, like a smart thermostat or a webcam, like a baby cam.
Yeah, this was a lot of what the questions are about smart TVs and Alexa and all the rest.
Right. Many of these devices use the universal plug and play feature so that they can basically make themselves locatable from the internet. And this is, it's a convenience for you. You can use your phone to say, look at the nursery cam that you've got running, your baby monitor running, or adjust the heat. Or now there are even appliances, there are ovens you can turn on and turn off. Normally, devices cannot be accessed from outside your local network. But by using universal plug and play, they can ask the router to open a port, which makes them locatable. And it's a convenience because then you don't have to think about setting up this hardware yourself. There are sometimes very good reasons to have these things. We like these devices, we like being able to do it. But you have to be aware that if universal plug and play is active, you don't know if a device has opened a connection through your network. And depending on the device, if that device itself is vulnerable, it can be used as a way for people to attack your network, access other devices on your network, and cause other kinds of havoc and bad actions. So now, normally this is something that's actually fairly easy to just turn off. The possible inconveniences is that you might add a smart device and you would have to sort of manually give it permission so that you could access it from outside your home. And this is one of these things, which is that if you're going to put these devices in your home, I'm of the opinion you really should know what it's doing. And there's, about what I'm saying here is whether this feature should be turned on or off. But I tend to believe that you should be secure first, and then convenience comes second.
And again, where's the setting for this? How would I even go about changing it?
When you log into a router, there will be a menu either across the top or down the side, all kinds of settings. And again, this is one of those things where you would Google the model number of your router and UPnP, and you will probably get taken directly to a page that shows you where that setting is. Fortunately, what they call this doesn't change. Now, if you want to add a device manually, it gets somewhat more involved. But the problem is that it's been a kind of all or nothing thing. You can either use universal plug and play and not think about how it's done, or you can learn how to do it. All of these things that I'm talking about, of course, are a choice. We read about this stuff. The thing is, in work, I hear about incidents on a daily basis. And and I sometimes I think, oh, doesn't everybody know that this is happening? And if that's not the case, and a lot of it does not, unless it's very large, it doesn't get picked up by the national news. But all of these things are preventable if you take these kinds of precautions. Not quite the last thing. We all love the fact that Wi-Fi is everywhere. You go into Starbucks and you use their Wi-Fi. You go practically anywhere and you can use publicly available Wi-Fi. But you have to remember that when you're doing this, the security of your traffic, anything you're doing on your phone or on your laptop in a public space, the security of that is only as good as that coffee shop or that library or that small business. And if those are not configured properly, and like I say here, most aren't, everything you do on your device is accessible to anyone else who's on that Wi-Fi network. That could be somebody else sitting in the same coffee shop as you, somebody else in that other small business, the owner of that small business themselves. So you want to be especially careful about the kinds of things that you do on your computer or on your phone when you're on public Wi-Fi.
So if I'm having a Wi-Fi problem and I go sit outside the New Lebanon Public Library in my car to get work done, how can I possibly know what the security protocols are on the New Lebanon Library Network? I'm just putting everything out at risk if I do confidential work or enter a credit card or anything like that. The person in the car next to me or somebody inside the library can see everything I'm doing if they wanted.
Potentially, if it hasn't been set up properly and securely, that's exactly what can happen. Now, fortunately for most of us, most websites that carry on transactions do so securely. You'll notice that you might notice that website names went from being HTTP to HTTPS, and oftentimes you'll notice in the address bar that there's a little padlock icon that appears, and what that means is that your traffic from your browser to that business has been encrypted. Unfortunately, that encryption, so that does give you a measure of safety, but again, the level of that safety is still subject to there's a lot of potential failures there. And so somebody monitoring a network can, depending on if anything isn't quite perfectly set up, someone else who's on that network can monitor the traffic and possibly interfere with that encryption. Which brings us to this. You may, if you watch as much television as I do, you might see an ad for VPN systems, and you might see them also pop up on websites. If you have a daytime job and you're working from home, your employer might have you using a VPN, a virtual private network, which is basically a way to encrypt, another way to encrypt the connection from your computer to their computer. And there are VPNs that you can subscribe to. You basically purchase, and you run software, and what happens is the traffic from your phone goes encrypted to one of this company's computers and then on to the final destination. So that adds another layer of security, because the traffic over even like the public Wi-Fi is encrypted from that Wi-Fi network and can't be observed. these are usually, they're fairly low cost, and there's, I'm not going to talk about them there, but there are guys who, they're ones that advertise, and they charge you. There are also free VPN services. A couple of things you have to know about VPNs, which is that because the VPN provider is giving you this encrypted network, when it reaches their server, they decrypt it because they have to in order to figure out where to send it next. So the question comes up, can you trust your VPN provider? If you happen to have an Android phone, you may see Google VPN. Google provides a VPN service, which is somewhat reassuring, except that that means that Google can read all your traffic. So you need to worry about it. The big problem is that most VPN providers operate outside the United States. The vast number of them operate out of Eastern Europe. And they're not, they can be somewhat sketchy. That's really what it comes down to, because they simply don't tell you necessarily what they're doing with your information. Any VPN that's free, you're the commodity. They're selling you to pay for things, and what they're doing, and you don't necessarily know what they're doing with your information. And in some cases, they use your home network for their other VPN customers. So when somebody in Europe wants to connect to a website in the United States securely, their traffic will travel through your home network to get there. So it's, and this is an evolving technology, and I really can't give you advice on who you can trust and who you can't. But like I said, if it's free, it's not trustworthy. If it's not, it basically you're betting on their reputation. And there are websites that rate them, but there's no like government oversight or anything to determine one is better or safer than another. Now we're getting to the business part. Let's look at the flip side of what we just talked about. If you have a public-facing, customer-facing business like a cafe or a shop, anytime where people are spending a lot of time in your business, you might feel you have to offer Wi-Fi because it's just expected these days. If you do this, you really must ensure that the Wi-Fi that you're offering to your customer is completely separate from anything else involved in going on in your business. Now, the internet provider to your business can help you with this, but any device that's in your network, that's in your business, including, like I'm saying, like a server, a point of sale or cash register, your security camera, your alarm systems, and even the thermostat in your building can all be connected to your network. And if it's not if it's not organized correctly, can be seen from the public Wi-Fi that you're providing to your customer. And I use the example when my wife and I were first moving out to this area, we stayed overnight in a hotel, and just because it's something I do, I scanned their network, their Wi-Fi. I logged onto the Wi-Fi and I scanned the network to see what I could see. And I could see other guests. Now I couldn't see what they were doing, but I could see other guests' iPhones and things like that. And then I could see the computer used for their reservation system. And I was even able to basically go to the point where I could attempt to remotely log into their reservation computer. And that's just should not happen. What I did, because this is the kind of guy I am, I found the manager of the hotel. I demonstrated what I was capable of doing, and I don't have any special tools. Everything I do this with is something, it's an app on my phone that I got, just off of the Play Store. And I said, you have to talk to your IT provider and you have to segregate these things. You cannot have this on the public network, because what that simply means is that somebody standing in the lobby of the hotel or even standing on the sidewalk outside could attempt to log into the servers that are running that business and have all kinds of information about the guests, their credit card information, whatever. And for any business, this is something you need to protect. And the problem is that other things, like I said, like a thermostat can be the route by which an attacker can get onto your network and then find your server where you're keeping your business information.
I remember hearing about a hospital being hacked because some of the medical devices that were those plug and play had no security in them, and that's how that they wormed their way into the system.
Correct. And there's there are lots of easily available software tools. Most of them don't even cost anything, that let you scan networks and find devices. And then there are other websites where all the vulnerabilities of these devices are published, so that you can, and things like their default logins. So if you haven't adequately protected all those other devices, it's a path in. And you might say, well, my business is too small to worry about, but you have to consider, what is your business worth to you? Someone can destroy your business through this just because they can, and or they can shake the public's confidence in your business. If you have a data breach, somebody may not want to do business with you anymore, and that's a customer that you can't get back. And we know that getting customers is much harder than keeping them. So especially if you have a customer-facing business, you should work with a trained professional to get this right. There's a few other things that can be done. For example, if you offer public Wi-Fi, you probably shouldn't be offering public Wi-Fi when you're closed. It makes you an attractive nuisance. People are going to use your storefront as a location to get Wi-Fi. Actually want your network when your business isn't open. It's something that can be done very straightforwardly, especially with business grade equipment, where you can say, from this day to this time of day, don't allow access. The other thing you should do, take your phone, take a walk around and see how far your
Gene, your audio is cutting in and out. Why don't you try turning your video off for a sec and see if it's better?
Okay, I'm sorry.
Oh, that's much better, whatever you did.
I just moved my headpiece, but
very low tech solution. It worked.
Okay, I guess it's getting old. But take your phone, walk around your building, and see how far your public Wi-Fi extends past your front door. You simply don't want to be providing free Wi-Fi service to the public park adjacent to your building. And these are things that it's a little harder to control, but you should at least be aware of it. Now, this is great because I guess we did get the poll data. If you take credit cards, you are subject to the payment card industry data security standard, which is PCI or sometimes PCI DSS. And this is pages and pages and pages of rules about your responsibility with other people's data. These rules apply to you even if all you do is take somebody's credit card over the phone, write it down, and then type it in and perform a sale. What you do with that information is controlled by these rules. What this is mostly about, of course, is protecting the customer's data, and preventing credit card fraud. If these rules get broken, and for example, your bank detects a lot of fraudulent activity around, or a customer complains that they used a card on your business, and then they were subject to other, to fraudulent transactions, the bank will investigate. If there's too many of these, the bank actually gets fined by the credit card industry. And they will, like banks do, pass that fine down onto you. I'm not going to get too scary here. These fines can be enormously high. And of course, it's also likely that if your bank even considers keeping you as a customer, they may charge you more for every transaction, or more likely, if you're too much of a risk, they simply won't do business with you, and then you have to try to find another credit card processor. And but word gets around. So now I am absolutely no way an expert on these rules. So but one of the key things is it's much easier to be compliant with the rules if you don't store the customer's credit card information. If you do store it, you're subject to all kinds of requirements to make sure that you're storing that data safely, that your employees don't necessarily have access to it. You're typically only allowed to show like the first four or the first five or the last four digits of a credit card number on a receipt, things like that. And the nature of how you do business, it sounds like many of you are probably using something like Stripe or even PayPal, and that does reduce, it reduces your risk and it reduces the number of rules you're subject to, but it doesn't mean you can ignore them. If you might use PayPal or Stripe to process the credit card, but if you enter that information in your own customer records, you're subject to these rules. And if you have a website that automatically accepts credit cards, there are all kinds of rules, and they vary depending on whether your website takes the customer to a third-party site like PayPal to complete the transaction, or if your website has a built-in shopping cart and you process the transaction through your own bank. This is probably, I think, something that could be done as its own deep dive. And like I say, I am not an expert on it, I'm just aware. I'm going to talk about one last thing. Excuse me a second. This might have been a poll question. Have you noticed that every website you go to asks your permission to use cookies? The reason they're doing that is to be compliant with what's called the General Data Protection Regulation. And this is something that was created and is the law in the European Union, and where there's actually very strict data privacy rules. If you store any information that's uniquely identifiable about somebody visiting your website under the GPDR, you have to ask for their consent to store their information. And oftentimes this is done with cookies. They want to know who you are, or at least what web address you're coming from. And they create some information so they can tell when you visit again. And that's not even if you haven't like created an account on that website, they still want to know if you visit them more than once. And that's considered, that could be considered personally identifiable. And so you're required to provide informed consent. So they say, this website uses cookies. Do you consent? And when you say yes, now they're in, they've complied with the GDPR, excuse me. Now, if you're only in the US, none of these rules apply to you. But given that this is, the 21st century, you may have visitors from the European Union. And if you offer goods or services, even if you don't charge for them, to someone in the EU, you're subject to the regulations. This is, again, now this is something that I'm aware of. I am not an expert on, and is potentially a subject for another deep dive. But you should be prepared, if you are building your own website, to comply with these regulations. And if you're going to do any commerce with other people outside the US, it's really critically important. And if they can create an account with things like their name, that's personally identifiable information, and so you're going to be potentially subject to it again.
All right, I have so many questions myself, and we have a very talkative bunch. Amy, I think you could probably fill the whole next half hour with questions. So Casey, let's stop recording. And let's open it up.